Of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this. A girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age. She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf.
When her marriage to the future king began to fall apart, Diana, Princess of Wales, began to separate herself from the confines of royal traditions, escaping the gilded cage, determined to use her influence for good. She focused on shining her spotlight upon those in need, particularly where their causes were sometimes deemed by others to be too difficult or controversial.
One of the things our mother taught William and I was the value of doing good when no one is watching.
She achieved so much in her life, from helping to shatter the stigma around AIDS, to fighting to ban landmines, and supporting the homeless. She touched the lives of millions. The truth is, though, that she was taken at only 36, just slightly older than I am today. And of course, we can never know what our mother would have gone on to do.
She visited hospitals late at night to comfort patients. She spent hours writing letters to privately support the work of others. She achieved a lot by shining a spotlight, but she worked just as hard when the cameras were gone.
As a mother, her energies were devoted to her boys, the most important part of her life, and she laid the foundations for them to grow into strong, resilient, and kind young princes, instilling into them qualities that would help to shape a truly modern monarchy.
Our mother once said that if we all play our part in making our children feel valued, the result will be tremendous.
Harry and I feel that our mother lives on in the countless acts of compassion and bravery that she inspires in others.
In her actions and in her words, Diana changed the workings of the British monarchy forever. After her death, William and Harry continue to fight to keep their mother's memory alive. Join us as we look back at her lasting legacy and her impact on those she loved the most. Don't call me an icon. I'm just a mother trying to help.
I was shown into this room at Sandringham House by a very over-attentive butler. And as I walked into this room, there was Diana sat on a sofa. William, aged 5, was attempting to play a piano, let's put it like that. And Harry, aged 3, was stood on a small coffee table, destaminizing this vase of royal lilies. And I didn't say anything. The butler said, "Oh, this is Inspector Wolf from London." And she said, "I don't envy you, looking after my children. They can be a bloody nuisance." And I was about to say something, at which point William turned round off this piano stool and said, in a sort of this just William way, "No, I'm not a ruddy nuisance." And Harry sort of chuckled in on the back of that. And at which point he falls off this table, and the vase of flowers falls off this table. And I'm thinking, God, what's happening here? At which point Diana says, "Come here, both of you." And they got off and run out, pursued by their mother. And I haven't said a thing. That set the scene, really, to what, Diana was like. The normality of this situation was something that was so far out of my mind. I didn't think for one moment something like this would happen within a royal palace. Diana had this idea that she wanted everybody within the household to be part of this family. So, in essence, we were all, part of this wider family. The chefs, the dressers, the chauffeurs, the housekeeper, the gardener, whoever else came in. We were all part of this gathering. I don't think it suited the Prince of Wales that much. I mean, he was very traditionally royal. And, it was a sort of very much an upstairs, downstairs arrangement with him. With Diana, it was different. You know, she wanted William and Harry to sort of move around the house and talk to the housekeeper and insistent that they refer to them by their first names. And so, in that sense, it was quite a jolly place to be honest. It was so different from other royal households.
Diana particularly was a modern parent, but she was a modern aristocratic parent, and she did use nannies. They lived in Kensington Palace in London, and they also had a country house, Highgrove, in Gloucestershire. And in both of those houses, there was a floor, the top floor of the house was given over to the nursery. And it had bedrooms and sitting rooms and dining rooms, and it was where the royal children spent most of their time with their nannies and with the chauffeurs and close protection officers. So it was a traditional sort of childhood, but with lots of love from both parents. Diana was very demonstrative as a mother. I think she had never been properly mothered herself because her own mother had left home when she was 6 years old. So she didn't really know what being a mother was, and I think she probably was much more like a big sister to her boys than a mother.
Diana was a wonderful mother. She was a very hands-on mother. She absolutely adored her children. I think, in retrospect, it's very easy to see Diana as absolutely perfect. And I think she has been airbrushed to be absolutely perfect. But at the time, I think a lot of people felt that she rather smothered her boys rather than mothered her boys, which she didn't. But it could look like that. She also used them as a weapon against Prince Charles.
I remember William's first day at school, which was really quite funny. William's in the back of the car with his mother. And, you know, she said, "Now listen, William, when we get to the school, there's going to be a lot of photographers there, and I don't want you mucking about." And he sort of put his head down beneath the peak of his cap and said, "I don't like photographers." He couldn't say photographers. And Diana said, "Well, you're going to get these for the rest of your life." I mean, you know, how profound was that? Anyway, we arrived at the school, and there was the usual bank of 50 to 60 photographers for this occasion.
The children were growing up. William began his first day at school.
Now, his arrival at the school was so different from Harry's, and this gives you an idea of their different characters, because when Harry arrived at the same school sometime later, with the same brief, I guess, from his mother, what does Harry do? He has that sort of fantastic ceremonial leer out of the window, putting his tongue out of the press.
The children didn't always behave in a royal way. This was Harry. It was soon Prince Harry's first day at kindergarten too, and as well as his parents, William was there to give his brother support. The royal wave still needed development.
Anywhere I see suffering, that is where I want to be, doing what I can.
Princess was carrying out more and more official engagements on her own. Her interests were with the very young and the very old, and those in hospitals and hospices. Sometimes she was called upon to try out equipment herself. This machine tests lung performance.
The 1980s saw the winds of change throughout society. But perhaps the most frightening and tragic was the arrival of the AIDS epidemic. Thousands were infected, and many were dying, and seemingly there was no cure and no hope.
I think what's interesting, that in the mid-80s, Diana had, you know, ticked all the boxes of opening fetes, you know, supermarkets, all the things that, you know, from that book of How to Become a Princess was handed to her at Buckingham Palace, not that it was, of course. You know, she thought, well, hang on a minute, I've done all that, I'm going to do something different. And then, in the mid-80s, on one of her frequent visits to see Her Majesty the Queen asked, and I remember taking Diana on this day to Buckingham Palace, driving through the garden gate door on the side of Buckingham Palace, parking the car under the tree. Diana went in, I sat in the car, read a newspaper. She was very buoyant when she went in, came out not very so buoyant, so I said, "Oh, what's up with you, you know?" And she said, "Well, you won't believe what just happened to me." I said, "No, I probably wouldn't, but what happened?" She said, "Oh, well, the Queen asked me what I was doing, and she said I wanted to get involved in fundraising for the AIDS charities." Well, let's not forget, this was the sort of mid-80s, or just after the mid-80s, when, you know, talking about AIDS was something that people found quite difficult to talk about. You know, homophobia was pretty rife at that time.
AIDS has raised some enormous emotional, moral, and spiritual issues that transcend the physical disease. The vicious circle of fear, prejudice, and ignorance has increased the spread of AIDS to an alarming level. The uncharitable have found the AIDS issue fertile ground to air their prejudices. If their views were voiced to help fight the disease, that would be fine. However, too often their attitudes reveal only their own narrowness of mind and a sad lack of common humanity.
But Diana had spoken to quite a number of people involved in AIDS research and charitable causes. She had visited the London Lighthouse. I'd been with her, so she was very keen on fundraising to find a cure for this disease, but more importantly, to find places of refuge for people dying with AIDS. Had spoken to Elton John and other people, etc., involved in this charity, and that's what she wanted to do. And the Queen then turned around and said, "Well, you know, why don't you do something nice?" Well, that was a complete blow up for her, because that made her even more determined to get involved with it.
The Princess of Wales felt not the slightest apprehension about her visit to the Middlesex Hospital and its AIDS ward, according to press reports. All the speculation had centred on whether she would wear gloves when shaking hands with the staff and patients on the new ward. But as she entered, to the delight of the staff, she clearly wasn't wearing gloves. And she shook hands with all the nurses, doctors, and all 10 patients on the ward. She stayed more than an hour, but was not filmed with any of the patients. They were worried about public exposure. Only one agreed to be photographed.
Ward visit was private. That's what the patients wanted, that it was purely private. She met 10 patients. She shook hands with all of them. When appropriate, when they were in bed, she sat on their bed next to them and was very natural indeed.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. What's more, you can share their homes, their workplaces, their playgrounds, and their toys. We all need to be alert to the special needs of those for whom AIDS is the last straw in an already heavy burden of discrimination and misfortune.
In 1987, Britain's first hospital ward for AIDS patients was opened by Diana, and it was here that she held hands with patients without wearing surgical gloves, and she helped challenge the idea that the virus could be transmitted by touch. She did her best to dispel widespread ignorance and brought greater awareness on the plight of those at the raw end of the AIDS epidemic.
After Diana's involvement with the AIDS charitable trusts, of which there are many, was vitally important to where we are today, where there is now, you know, a complete, almost total recovery of people dying from AIDS. You know, that early initiative of Diana, who was, you know, instrumental in fundraising, you know, hundreds of thousands because of who she was, and her visiting AIDS hospices, which I went to with her, you know, to raise the awareness of the problems and the need for research. So that was, you know, Diana's involvement with that. It was controversial.
Her most publicised crusade was to dispel fears of contact with AIDS victims. On her many trips to open new wards devoted to the treatment of sufferers, she made a point of shaking hands with and talking to the patients.
Harry himself, you know, sort of picked up that mantle where Diana left with. So he's involved in that, in the sort of the AIDS issue, even today in the 21st century.
When my mother held the hand of a man dying of AIDS in an East London hospital, no one would have imagined that just over a quarter of a century later, treatment would exist that could see HIV-positive people live full, healthy, loving lives.
I will fight for my children on any level in order for them to be happy and have peace of mind and carry out their duties.
When they were growing up, William and Harry's relationship was incredibly close. The two of them needed one another. They had, an unhappy home environment. They were, luckily they did have nannies, and they were therefore kept away from quite a lot of the acrimony that was going on between their parents. But nonetheless, children pick up on things. They're very sensitive. And it was also fortunate that they went away to boarding school, because again, that removed them from most of the nastiness that was going on.
When I was speaking to Wendy Berry, who was the housekeeper at Highgrove, she said that the boys were very well protected. And they really didn't know what was going on, the fights and things between their parents. They didn't know because there was always someone to whisk them away. A protection officer or a nanny. It's not like being in a little council house, when they can hear this shouting through the walls. They were always whisked away. So I think that William and Harry didn't suffer quite as much as we said that they did, because they weren't aware of it. I think in adulthood they're very aware of it, but at the time they were quite protected.
They did rely on one another. They were very close. The two are very different characters, but they complement one another very well. And they've always had a great banter. They tease each other mercilessly.
I was very fortunate to go with Diana to Richard Branson's island, Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands, but literally half a mile across the lagoon at Byrus Creek were 60 to 70 of the world's press, media, paparazzi, whatever you want to phrase it. And she said, I'm not giving any photo calls, Ken. I'm not doing anything. The manager from the island, he said, I've got some gifts for the children. I said, oh, what's that? He said, I've got a couple of catapults. These were these massive, great elastic catapults that you tie to two trees. And he had this sort of bag of balloons that you fill with water. And I thought, oh, maybe great for the kids. They can sort of have target competitions. William heard all this, and he came up to me. He said, Ken, he said, I've got a very good idea. I said, what's that? He said, well, when Mummy has to give a press opportunity, Harry and me and my cousins, we can be on the cliff top and we can fire the balloons at the press. So I got on my boat straight over to Byrus Creek, and then there spoke to the late James Whittaker of the Daily Mirror, a formidable character. So he coordinated the event, and I said, you've got 15 minutes off the shore. Diana will be there with the kids on the beach with the buckets and spades. That's it. When it's all over, not a problem. So the following day, this flotilla of small boats arrive, and they were delighted, of course. Some of the best shots of Diana that ever came out in the sort of leopard skin costume, etc. And there they were, assembled in this flotilla, and all was going well until suddenly, I heard this word, fire, from the cliff tops, and there Harry and his friends released this salvo of watercolored balloons that landed right in the center of this flotilla of cameramen who incidentally found it incredibly amusing. And one of the balloons hit Whittaker. And of course, that was his piston resistance, because he then shouts up something, I've just been flayed by the future King of England. And of course, everybody started laughing on Diana on the beach, her mother, her sisters, her brother. It was an incredible experience, all because of William's idea.
One of Diana's challenges was to maintain an air of optimism and laughter with her children, whilst her marriage to Prince Charles was very publicly and irrevocably falling apart.
With a Diana shirt that doesn't match, I can understand that.
Oh, I thought it did.
I'm teasing,
No, I thought it did. You haven't seen the socks yet. No, they certainly don't go.
Tintin.
Yes.
Tensions were high, and soon the two parents were barely speaking. They managed to plan a skiing holiday together. But the tensions and conflict were made worse when Diana's father, Earl Spencer, died, and Charles accompanied Diana home, trying in vain to comfort her along the way. The Prime Minister at the time, Sir John Major, announced their separation at the end of 1992. One scandal after another was revealed to the world by the ever-hungry tabloid media, and Charles and Diana finally divorced in 1996.
I think they were both very sad. Diana, in particular, never wanted to get divorced. In her heart, although she was with another man, Charles was the one that got away, and she always had a place in her heart for Charles. And it wasn't what she wanted, and she felt a failure. They both felt they'd failed. And they both felt they'd failed their children. So it was very, very sad for both of them.
I think the biggest disease the world suffers from in this day and age is the disease of people feeling unloved.
Her courage and compassion were obvious wherever she went. This was an Indonesian leprosy hospital where her refusal to worry about close contact with patients was reckoned to have helped change attitudes to the disfiguring disease.
Leprosy, yes, people always thought that this was sort of, why is Diana getting involved in some sort of biblical problem? Well, in Nepal, when I was with her in Nepal, there are people today suffering from leprosy. It's hard to imagine, but, her patronage, helps people that we don't even dream or think about.
For Diana, Princess of Wales, leprosy and the need to rid the world of the stigma that blights its sufferers has become something of a personal crusade. Addressing an international conference in London this morning, she called on people to show greater awareness and perhaps, like her, extend a caring hand.
Leprosy is not something of the past. It has not disappeared from the list of medical diseases. It's not a condition that only exists in the Old Testament of the Holy Bible. It's always been my concern to touch people with leprosy, trying to show in a simple action that they are not reviled, nor are we repulsed.
Often people think about Diana living here in the United Kingdom, have no idea that her work involved in foreign missions to do with leprosy, helps people, far, the back streets of Kensington Palace or whatever. So, it's quite important. Her role, she had to have something to do as a princess. And, for her, yeah, the fun bits of the supermarkets, walking down the streets of Glasgow, whatever, shaking people's hands was great. But getting involved in these major issues of AIDS, the homeless, and so forth was very important to her.
Until her death in 1997, Diana was patron of the leprosy mission. She very publicly made a point of shaking hands with leprosy patients on her visit to Indonesia in 1989. And she continued her quest to lead by example by having physical contact when visiting leprosy hospitals and missions in Nepal, Zimbabwe, and India. Diana felt she could make a greater difference by being less diluted and simply focusing all her energies into a small number of important causes. She reduced the number of charities she directly supported from over 100 very worthy organizations down to 6. The leprosy mission was one of the remaining 6 until the very end of her life, a testament to her dedication to the cause.
She became more involved with the serious aspects of royal patronage, willing to visit the less fortunate and give them encouragement. She was patron of Turning Point, an organisation that helps the mentally handicapped, as well as people recovering from drug or alcohol addiction. Drug abuse was another of her concerns. She wanted to be involved in the fight against it and spoke of the problem in Newcastle.
We have a battle on our hands. It has to be waged on 2 major fronts. prevention and cure. As far as prevention is concerned, parents and teachers are in the front line. As a parent myself, I'm only too aware of the responsibility this implies in terms of the kind of upbringing best suited to encourage the child to say no.
William and Harry were keen to ensure her memory lived on, and they worked to include the Leprosy Mission as one of the beneficiaries of funds raised at the Concert for Diana in 2007. Family is the most important thing in the world.
Charles.
Shut up.
Charles.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Harry. Sorry. William. William.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, hold on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
William, we love you.
Love you.
I couldn't believe that somebody like her could die so tragically in something as mundane as a car accident. I was renovating an older property in Dorset. I had no telephone, no mobile phone. It was the era of the pager. And at about 1 o'clock in the morning, this pager danced across the wooden floorboards where I was sleeping. And it actually said, you know, ring my office urgently. So I literally had to walk up to the phone box in the village because I didn't have a phone. And I spoke to chief superintendent at my office. And he said, thanks for calling. He said, got some bad news. I said, oh, I bet it is. And he said, no, your boss has died in Paris. Well, why is he telling me the commissioner of police has died in Paris? I couldn't work it out. I said that to him. He said, no. He said, the Princess of Wales has been killed in a car crash in Paris. Then it did sink in. And my immediate reaction was, well, that's impossible. You know, if you can't die in a car crash, you know, no, I just couldn't believe it. He said, well, you have to believe it. Then I was part of a team that was coordinating the funeral. And my particular role was, I was the liaison coordinator for the internal security at Westminster Abbey.
William and Harry spoke to their mother on the phone the evening before she died, completely unaware it would be the last time they would speak to her.
She'd wanted to speak to both of them, and they were playing a game, and they were actually quite irritated at having to leave the fun they were having and go and speak to their mother on the phone. And so they tried to get her off the phone quite, you know, as quickly as they reasonably could and get back to their game. And of course, that was the last time they spoke to her. That was the last time they heard her voice. She died in the early hours of the next morning. And you know, how does any 15-year-old and 12-year-old cope with that, it was devastating for them, obviously.
Of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this. A girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age.
She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys.
I think that brought them even closer together because, you know, they had, again, I mean, it was they couldn't share with anyone else what they had experienced. It wasn't, you know, like the death of any normal parent, because with the death of a normal parent, you don't have the world grieving as well. It was almost as though their grief was being devalued by the grief of strangers. So I think it was a very difficult time for them, and during that sort of the years after Diana's death, there was a bond which was closer, arguably, than most siblings.
It was an extraordinary event. For me, the eulogy given by her brother, Charles Spencer, was incredibly powerful. I mean, he held back, didn't hold back at all about the role of the monarchy and the criticism he had for the royal family and the media. And this was being relayed outside. So, you know, what I remember was this, it was like a sort of dry leaves falling on a sort of corrugated tin roof. But it was actually the clapping outside of people that were applauding Spencer for what he was saying. It must have been very difficult for the Queen and other members of the royal family to listen to this.
She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf. We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair. William and Harry, we all care desperately for you today. We're all chewed up with sadness at the loss of a woman who wasn't even our mother. How great your suffering is, we cannot even imagine. Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister. The unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.
I want my boys to have an understanding of people's emotions, their insecurities, people's distress, and their hopes and dreams.
Early morning, and it's hard to sleep on the pavement, but in Britain's cities these days, many hundreds of homeless people do. As the winter comes on, it's not a life to be envied, especially perhaps at this particular time of year. This Christmas, the homeless charity Centrepoint is focusing on young runaways, as the organisation puts it, running from uncaring homes to dangerous streets. Today, Princess Diana lent her high-profile support to try to stop these runaways from becoming permanently homeless, to raise funds to give them somewhere to stay and someone to listen.
She was an incredibly generous individual, not only with the material things of giving, but with the generosity of actually listening and her time. And I saw that literally time and time again with hospice work, with Help the Aged, particularly good with dealing with elderly people, the homeless. The number of occasions I went with her, completely unannounced, with no press, to charities in Victoria. She was very friendly with the late Cardinal Basil Hume, the Catholic Archbishop, and we went to his charity in Victoria, and you know, witnessing 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, the homeless getting a change of clothing, eating something.
One of Diana's most important and memorable charitable endeavours was her work with the homeless. It was one of the charities that she exposed William and Harry to at a young age, as she felt it important for her boys to see how homeless young people live in the most challenging circumstances.
The age of homeless youngsters is coming down. Children as young as 11 have called on Centrepoint this year. Money is not the heart of the matter. It is the lives of young people which are the greatest cause for concern. Through supporting Centrepoint, we are investing in the lives of young people, perhaps our nation's greatest natural resource. So, ladies and gentlemen, as the season of goodwill swings into gear, I hope that all of us will be mindful of the Englishman who doesn't have a home to withdraw into.
And interesting there is, they're not interested. The homeless aren't interested in royalty. They're not fazed by, you know, Diana, the Prince of Wales, or William, who was there as well. These men and women that have fallen on hard times, what's crucial to them is keeping dry, getting a new change of clothing, and something to eat. They're not interested in shaking hands and having silly talk with royalty. But Diana knew by being there, by showing William what it was like, in order to be fed, in order to wear something warm, in order to be somewhere that's warm, costs money. And that's where Diana had the role, because she could generate finance because of who she was, and actually did it because she firmly believed in it and knew that there's no point going on and shaking hands with somebody that's down and out. They don't want that. They want something to eat, they want something to wear, they want something to live. And that's where she could be the provider.
William says he cannot even begin to imagine what it must be like to sleep rough night after night, but says his experience has deepened his understanding of homelessness.
In 2005, Prince William went on to become patron of Centrepoint. And in 2009, he opted to sleep rough on the streets of London for a night, highlighting the vital work undertaken by Centrepoint. In 2019, he also became patron of The Passage, a homeless prevention charity that's helped thousands of people in need.
Some of my earliest memories relate to times that my parents spoke to me, or even better, showed me what it meant to have both privilege and responsibilities. I remember being taken by my mother to a homelessness shelter at a young age, her explaining to me why the people I met there matter, and why no society can be healthy unless we take other people seriously.
It's vital that the monarchy keeps in touch with the people. It's what I try and do.
Tie into to make sure right at the back we're still hearing the voice.
We've decided that it's going to be called Concert for Diana, because obviously the evening is going to be purely about her. And as we both want to make sure, first and foremost, the evening is for her. It's to remember her and to commemorate her life and celebrate it.
I think you're also hoping to raise some money for some charities as well?
Yeah, we are. We're raising money for Centrepoint in Centre Bali, I'm patron of Centre Point and Harry's patron of Centre Barley. And they're both charities that continue on from my mother's legacy. And also for the Diana Memorial Fund and her 5 main charities that she was patron of, or had a great deal of interest in just before she died. We wanted to represent exactly what our mother would have wanted, how she was and all that sort of things. So therefore, the church service alone isn't enough. We wanted to have this big concert with, full of energy, full of sort of fun and happiness, which I knew she would have wanted. And on her birthday as well, it's got to be the best birthday present she's ever had. And with it, we can, by the 2 of us organising it, we wanted to have the fact that the evening is all about our mother. The main purpose is to celebrate and to have fun and to remember her in a fun way.
In the years that followed Diana's death, the 2 princes remained extremely close. They helped support each other through the overwhelming grief of losing their mother, and they tried to look ahead to a future in which they could keep her memory alive and follow her passion for helping others. On what would have been her 46th birthday, in the year that marked the 10th anniversary of her death, the 2 brothers paid tribute to their mother by organising a fundraising concert in her memory. After finishing their education, both brothers went on to train in the armed forces.
There's a long tradition of senior members of the royal family going into the armed forces because, after all, the monarch is head of the armed forces. And it's a useful place, really, for them to be because, certainly in modern times, because they are away from the prying eyes of the public and the press.
Prince Harry was on the front line in Afghanistan during his military career, whilst William went on to become an air search and rescue helicopter pilot after an initial term at sea in the Royal Navy. The time came when the 2 princes needed to take on greater responsibility and to take on their share of royal duties.
Well, William, like his brother Harry, when it was clear that they were going to be part of this new royal structure, because, when the Duke of Edinburgh officially resigned or retired from royal duties at the age of 95, I think he was, the Queen made it quite clear at that time she wanted, the younger, more active, fit royals to take on a greater responsibility of the role, and which I think, was fair. And the Prince of Wales acknowledged that, even William acknowledged it, and Harry acknowledged that. But when this happened, I don't think any of them really had a clear plan of what or how they were going to do this. And of course, what they did do was actually literally pick up the template from their late mother and look at her charitable works that she abandoned in 93, 94.
Both William and Harry dedicated a great deal of time to various charities and organisations, the majority being picked for the extraordinary impact and work done by their mother, Princess Diana.
But in one sense, Harry and I feel that our mother lives on in the countless acts of compassion and bravery that she inspires in others. And it is why we are so pleased that her name is being put to good use by the Diana Award to recognise young people who are making a mark on the world around them.
It is this spirit of quiet selflessness that unites these 20 recipients of the Legacy Award. We must remember none of the amazing young people you have seen today did what they did for recognition or reward.
I think the time when that bond started to fracture a bit was when Harry probably came out of the army and started going into royal work. And I think there was a little bit of, the space was quite small within their charitable world for the 2 brothers together. And I think Harry slightly railed at the hierarchy. Here was his brother, his mate, but who was slightly pulling rank at times because he was the senior member of the family. So I think there were 1 or 2 little niggles going on there.
Following Harry's marriage to Meghan, There seems to have been a gradual shift in the royal brothers' relationship. After a few years together as working royals, and in an unprecedented shock move, Harry and Meghan left the gilded cage.
There were rumours that Meghan was bullying some of the staff. Her method of working was not what they had been used to. Whether it was because she was American, whether it was because she was a movie star who treated people in a different way, it was not what had happened in the past within that royal household. And I think William, when he heard that some members of staff were being reduced to tears or not enjoying their life anymore, I think he got very angry. And he confronted Harry and told him what was going on. And Harry, I think, was protective of Meghan. So that is where I think the seeds of it all, of a fracture in this bond that had been so close, came from.
In a tell-all interview with Oprah, the couple discussed the trappings of royal life and the need for an escape. Among other things, they accused someone in the family of being racist.
It was a terrible interview, which really did huge damage to the monarchy, to Britain as a whole, because Meghan talked about the country really being racist, and did huge damage to his relationship, to Harry's relationship with his father and with William.
The trust and loyalty once felt by William was lost. The unbreakable bond between the brothers appeared to have broken. Everyone needs to be valued. Everyone has the potential to give something back.
When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did. I realized then their attention would inevitably focus on both our private and public lives.
The invasive nature of the press and media became overwhelming for Diana, and she decided to remove herself from public life, reducing her charitable work to allow her to focus on a few she felt very passionate about.
But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear. At the end of this year, when I've completed my diary of official engagements, I will be reducing the extent of the public life I've led so far.
She continued to campaign tirelessly for humanitarian causes. Her fame generated huge publicity, and simply by being photographed with the disabled victims of landmines, she ensured those working to remove them won unprecedented support.
Well, Diana took up unpopular, difficult causes. That's what really was the difference. And she took up political causes slightly, but like the landmines campaign was political, and she got criticised very unfairly for it. But it was very successful, and she did succeed in getting landmines banned. So it was a huge triumph.
Despite the controversy at home, the princess's campaigning continued today in what's believed to be the most heavily mined town in the world. Already briefed about the political row she'd stepped into, she seemed taken aback by the description of her as a loose cannon.
But yeah, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all.
It's been said, though, that you're aligning yourself with Labour policy. Do you think that's wise?
Labour, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what
We
you're
have really to keep the programme going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. She listened as we were given a detailed account of each weapon unearthed here and its devastating capability.
If you set one of these off, it's going to jump up, and this will take out everybody in 25 metres.
She wanted to actually be out in the field doing things. And that was her raison d'etre. And she was really excited about the future and what she realised that she had the power to change things. And that really was exciting to her, really exciting. And she was looking out for other projects, and she had this idea that she would get a group of very powerful women together. So herself, and I think one, it would have been maybe Nancy Reagan, Lucia Fletcher de Lima, her friend, but she would also get, she would get some powerhouses from America and from the UK together, and they would take things all together in a very, very high-profile way.
Shortly before leaving Africa, the Princess of Wales met Red Cross officials and promised her long-term support for their campaign against landmines. She insisted she had not been worried by the debate back home that had resulted from her comments.
I saw it merely as a distraction because I'm not a political figure. I am a humanitarian figure, and always have been and always will be.
No, she should be on the other side. Should be on the side of the track. Can't we just get...
I knew the statistics, but putting a face to those figures brought the reality home to me. Like when I met Sandra, the 13-year-old girl, 2 days ago, who had lost her leg. For people like her, the rest of her life will be very different. And we must stop the landmines if we can.
In total, it's taken 2 years to clear 6,500 explosives in an area of just a few kilometres around the town centre. The visit to Quito was unscheduled. At the last minute, the princess asked to be taken to one of the towns worst affected by Angola's civil war. At the local school, she was amazed to discover lessons still continued during the fighting.
I'm not so sure I'd turn up for a lesson in bullets. It's amazing. That's a lot of discipline.
The CEO of a mine removal charity, Halo Trust, credits Diana for the Ottawa Mine Ban Treaty, which was signed by 122 countries after her death. Although the impact of this treaty stopped the use and production of landmines, there remain to this day thousands in the grounds of battlefields following decades of war. Following in her footsteps, Prince Harry worked with the Trust to ensure the continuation in the efforts to fulfill the promises made by the treaty and to protect thousands of potentially affected civilians.
To walk in her footsteps is clearly quite emotional for me, but I think as much as she did then, there is still so much to do. But without question, if she hadn't have campaigned the way that she did 22 years ago, this could arguably still be a minefield. So yeah, I'm incredibly proud of what she's been able to do and meet these kids here who were born on this street, who actually didn't even know that this was a minefield.
Diana was a member or patron of more than 100 charities during her lifetime, and William and Harry have been determined to continue her legacy by supporting many of those organisations.
In August 1997, my mother travelled to Bosnia with Ken Rutherford. When she was there, she met two young boys, one Muslim, one Serbian, who had both lost legs to landmines. She shared their stories with the world and helped campaigners, many of whom are in this room, to change history.
They keep me on my toes, they're quite naughty.
Those two young boys, Malik and Zarko, are now grown men and are with us today. 20 years on, they both still struggle with their physical and emotional injuries. When my mother said goodbye to Zarko that August, just weeks before her untimely death, she told him he would not be forgotten. Please help me keep her word to Zarko and Malik and other people like them throughout the world.
Carry out a random act of kindness with no expectation of reward, safe in the knowledge that one day someone might do the same for you. The memory of Diana and the work she did and what she achieved across the globe is a legacy of the utmost importance to both William and Harry. In a 2021 inquiry carried out by Lord Dyson, Diana's infamous interview with Martin Bashir was deemed unethical.
William and Harry were absolutely horrified when it was discovered how Bashir had tricked their mother into telling such intimate things about her life. And they were pleased with the results of the inquiry, but it still had happened. And I don't think they felt there was a punishment that was suitably bad enough for Bashir.
It is my view that the deceitful way the interview was obtained substantially influenced what my mother said. The interview was a major contribution to making my parents' relationship worse and has since hurt countless others. It brings indescribable sadness to know that the BBC's failures contributed significantly to her fear, paranoia, and isolation that I remember from those final years with her.
They just thought, well, this has happened, so there's got to be a way forward, that journalism has to be more answerable. And I think William will be, forever very, very wary. I mean, he was wary before, but it just makes him even more wary.
In an era of fake news, public service broadcasting and a free press have never been more important. These failings, identified by investigative journalists, not only let my mother down and my family down, they let the public down too.
Both William and Harry immediately released statements on the outcome of this inquiry. Though clearly unhappy about what happened, they were obviously relieved to establish the truth about a most tragic event in their lives. Despite the rift in their relationship, in July 2021, on what would have been the princess's 60th birthday, William and Harry were united in the unveiling of a statue of Diana at Kensington Palace, in memory of the life and achievements of their beloved mother. Even 25 years after her death, she brought the boys closer again, reuniting them in troubling times.
I think that Diana would be so proud of both of them. She'd be absolutely thrilled about William and the way he's shaped his life. And of course I think she would just love Catherine. And I think they would get on very, very well, because they kind of would respect each other. And I think she would be very proud that Harry'd broken away from the royal family. I think when he says, my mum would be proud, I'm sure he's right. I think she would be very proud, but I think she'd be very sad that Harry's, not taken the responsibility that he should have done as the second son.
Diana will never be forgotten, and her work as a shining example in the world of charitable endeavour is only exceeded by her dedication to her boys, her princes, William and Harry.
It's their generation that will decide the fate of the monarchy into this century and beyond. It's their generation. So I think there are changes afoot that will see the monarchy move in a new direction. But I firmly believe that the programme of modernisation, and there'll be those that disagree with me, that began really during the sort of very short Diana period. Even as a non-working member of the royal in the latter stages of her life, she'll always be remembered for her work and her programme of modernisation, this sort of getting in touch with people, and her programme against government advice of getting involved in the lands mines crusade in Angola and Mozambique. It was very important for people to remember that. And I think that's why people to this day still remember and talk about Diana, because of the way that she began a change at the beginning of how we perceive the royal family to be. And I think in her two sons, certainly William, more so now than Harry because of his situation, sees a direction very much akin to that of his mother.
She never once allowed her unfaltering love for us to go unspoken or undemonstrated. She will always be remembered for her amazing public work. But behind the media glare, to us, just two loving children, she was quite simply the best mother in the world.